Well, a couple of years ago when we had the former French ambassador to the United States, Jean-David Lavitte, out to BYU, we had him in a relatively modest-sized room, and I think we ended up doing about 2 or 3 overflow rooms to accommodate all the crowd. And so, Mr. Ambassador, we've learned our lesson today. We booked you into a bigger room. I'm glad that all of you have come out today to hear about French diplomacy on the eve of the European presidency. Let me quickly explain that the presidency referred to here is the presidency of the European Union, which rotates among the 27 member states, and France will begin its presidency the first of the year. And Ambassador Vimont will talk about French priorities during this 6-month presidency. We're delighted to have him here. He is a graduate of the School of National Administration, the ENA in Paris. He is a longtime French diplomat with a number of postings, in particular in Brussels, with European Union institutions and the French mission to the European Union. He has been ambassador for France in the United States since the fall of 2007, appointed by the newly elected President Nicolas Sarkozy in August of 2007. And we are simply delighted to have him here, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming him to campus.
Thank you for your welcome, and thank you for the David Kennedy Center for International Studies to welcome me in this huge, impressive room with all of you here. Contrary to what has just been said a few minutes ago, looking at the setting, the landscape, I wonder if we really should be here all together. We should be rather traveling, it should be more reasonable to go out and have a nice walk in the mountains. But you asked for a lecture on French diplomacy, you've got it. Let me just tell you that I'm very pleased to give you a few insights on my personal opinion about where is French diplomacy today, in a few months before we take over the European presidency, the presidency of the European Union. And now, of course, I will look at this and focus mainly through the relations that France has with your own country, because I think this may be of some interest to you. Let me go through 2 or 3 observations, and I'll do not more than that, and then go for question and answer session, because once again I think that could be the most valuable for all of you. My first observation, and I think this is very important, is to understand what has happened with the election of President Nicolas Sarkozy last May of last year, when he was elected President of the Republic. Because really, what was the purpose of President Sarkozy as he was elected regarding French diplomacy? Was really to put back France into the mainstream of foreign affairs. Not that it had not been there in the past, on the contrary, but let's say that in the last years that preceded that election, because of events that took place at the time, because of the difficulties we may have had with America, because of the fact that the French electorate voted no in 2005 on the referendum for the new European treaty, France had stayed a little bit on the side for the last 2 years of President Chirac's mandate. There was this general impression that we had to wait for a new momentum, and that new momentum could only be given through a new presidential election. And in fact, I think this was very much the own perception by President Chirac of what was going on. So there we had a new president, and we were waiting to see what he could do to put back France into the mainstream of foreign policy. And what he did, and I think this is important to understand, is that he took 2 of the main obstacles that we were facing, 2 of the major issues we were facing, and it is there that he put the most pressure. One was precisely the relationship between the United States and France. As soon as he was a candidate, and some would even say even before that, he stated regularly that he was a friend of America, and if he was elected, he wanted to change the mood, the atmosphere, the feeling of the relationship between our 2 countries. that did not mean that he wanted to change everything in French foreign policy. On the contrary, as I will explain to you as we go on, much of the principal values and convictions of France are still there, very much at the forefront. But it was mostly a question of atmosphere, a question of feeling, the way in which we try to manage together our relationship, to be more positive and constructive, and to base this relationship on a partnership of trust and confidence. And this is exactly what he had done very quickly. As soon as he was elected, and in spite of what everybody had told him, he went ahead, came here to spend his private holidays, which I think got some press coverage here in your country, and then went on to have a bilateral visit in November that was, I think, a great success, and addressed your Congress to state very publicly that he wanted the relationship between our two countries to be renewed and to go on with a new atmosphere. What was the catchphrase of that intervention? I would say it was those few words: "You can trust France. She is a friend. She is a loyal ally, but she will never be aligned, and this you have to be aware of." Having said that, and I think this is very important, he put his words into action immediately, and I think this is where also you have to be quite conscious of that. Because if you look at the main international issues your country and our country are facing, you will discover that in all those issues we have, by a way or another, stressed again the importance of the relationship between our two countries and tried to put forward some sort of partnership that is, I think, rather interesting and to some extent renewed and modernized. For instance, Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, people could think that France was on the verge of deciding to leave Afghanistan and to let NATO find its own way by itself. On the contrary, Nicolas Sarkozy, as soon as he arrived, stated rather quickly that, first of all, France was there to stay, and we were ready to stay in Afghanistan as long as needed, because this was a test for the solidarity of the NATO alliance and also for its credibility, I would say. Secondly, that he was ready to enhance our military presence if necessary, and reflection is going on at the moment in Paris about that reinforcement, and I think decisions will be announced in the near future, at the beginning of next month in the NATO summit in Bucharest. So that's a second very important point. But thirdly, and I think this also is very important, Nicolas Sarkozy said that it wasn't all just to have a military presence there, even to increase a military presence. What we had to find altogether in Afghanistan is to better understand what is the reasons we are there. In other words, to try to redefine the strategy of all our countries in Afghanistan. Because as time goes along, and as we have been there for nearly a little bit more than six years, the impression we get more and more is that we have created a huge gap between our presence and the Afghan population. In fact, the Afghan population understands less and less what we're trying to do and gives the impression that they consider the NATO forces as a force of occupation. That means that there is a clear misunderstanding there, and we have to bridge that gap as quickly as possible, looking at all the different elements of the policy we are going through at the moment in Afghanistan. Not only military, but also political, looking at the way the dialogue between the government of President Karzai and the regional leaders can go on, looking also at the kind of technical and financial assistance we're giving to that country, looking at the way we can manage the terrible problem of poppy culture, of the drug there. All this we think we have to face and try to find solution to those many challenges, and that is very necessary. So you see, on one side, France reaffirming its clear solidarity with its Western allies, with your country, but at the same time setting out the kind of policy we think it's necessary to go there, and a policy we think inspired by many of the principles we defend here and there. Iraq, second example I could give to you. We were very eager to stay away from Iraq as much as possible. We didn't agree on the military intervention, and we still think that a solution in Iraq can only be a political solution. But the difference maybe that Nicolas Sarkozy has brought about since he's been elected is to try to see in which way he can help, and France could help, to try precisely to reach for a political solution in Iraq. We all know this will take time, and that we were going to need much more time to find a solution where there could be national reconciliation among the different Iraqi communities. But at least we're ready to see and to work with most of our international partners, with the countries of the area, which have a first say in those matters, also with the different communities, the Sunnis, the Shiites, the Kurds, to see how we could try to find a solution. And of course, apart from that willingness on our behalf to play a part in the international negotiations going there, we're also ready to see how we can help with technical assistance in fields such as public health, such as education, such as the reorganization of the local police. We're ready to help there and to see what can be done. Third example, let me just take another one, Iran, the nuclear issue in Iran. There also we have reaffirmed very clearly our position, which is a position made of a two-way street, I would say, with Iran. On one side, the need to commit ourselves to economic and financial sanctions, and to go ahead as long as necessary in putting into action those sanctions, as long as Iran doesn't accept what has been our prior condition from a long time now, which is to suspend their nuclear program, because we think that that nuclear program is fraught with a lot of suspicious activities, that it is dedicated for military purposes, and that at least they should suspend this program so that we can have clear and serious negotiations to see what we go. But at the same time, and on the other hand, we are stressing also in the most obvious way and the clearest way possible that we have interesting proposals to put to the Iranian leadership. Proposals of a strategic dialogue, proposals for cooperation in all new technologies, and proposals, of course, in the nuclear field, the civilian nuclear field. In other words, we are not against nuclear energy in Iraq, we're just against the military purpose that could be behind those nuclear programs. So we have stressed that very forcefully. We are going ahead with that two-way approach, and we hope that at one point this will be understood in Tehran. I could give you other examples. I'll stop there. Maybe during your questions you will ask more. But my main point is just to let you understand that those were not just words. There have been actions there. And since now, last summer, France has become an ally that has, once again, ideas that it can put on the table, that take initiatives, that try to work in a constructive and positive way with the present American administration, that's looking forward for the new administration that will come in, that is ready to be a trusted ally, that will never mince its words, that will go on saying what it wants, because, as you know, France is rather eager to retain its autonomy and its independence. But we're ready to talk when we have differences, but we intend to be as constructive as possible. The second obstacle that was there was with European Union. As I told you a few minutes ago, France had blocked the whole European process by voting no in a referendum in May 2005, which was a referendum on the approval of the constitutional treaty, a new treaty that could enhance the institution of European Union and that would allow European Union to go ahead. With the French negative vote, everything was stopped, and everything, in fact, was waiting for France to bring back some new momentum to Europe. And we've done that. As soon as he was elected, Nicolas Sarkozy came back to the negotiating table, and with the help of the German presidency, Germany had the presidency at that time, we have worked very closely together to set up and define a new treaty, the Lisbon Treaty, that, in other words, to put it simply, in simple terms, Europe is never simple, you have to know that, but anyway, let's put it in simple terms. We took more or less all of the arrangements of the draft constitutional treaty, put them in another way, and got them in this Lisbon Treaty. The good thing about that is, as it was a new treaty, we decided that the ratification of this treaty would go through our national parliament and not through another French referendum. And mind you, as French have become quite unpredictable with their referendum, this was exactly what our European partners were asking us. And as soon as we said that we would not go through a new referendum, I think that most of the difficulties were put aside, and now we're all going into this process of ratification, and it seems to us that a new road is opening for Europe, to which I'll come back in a few seconds. So there we are at the moment. We have gone over those two hurdles, and now we're ready to go ahead and to see how French diplomacy could manage to help our partners to advance and find solution to the different issues we're facing. Let me here again, as a new remark, give you a few insight about what we intend to do with Europe. I think that the first effort we want to do with the Europeans is try to help Europe play a bigger part and have a bigger contribution in world affairs. At the moment, we're very far away from there, and quite often I can hear in your country people criticizing Europe for being too timid, or not being strong enough, or not wishing strong enough to go and play a major part in the world. And to a large extent, I could agree with those criticisms. But I think you have to understand, through the kind of process we're trying to get through, here we are today, 27 countries that have not at all the same tradition in foreign diplomacy, that have come from different horizons, and that we are trying to mix together, put together, in order to come out with a common view on most of foreign issues. And this is very difficult, and this is going to take time. Right up to the point where we're thinking at the moment that it's better not to try to work all the 27 of us together, because when we try to do that, usually after 2 or 3 days of negotiations, we go nowhere and everybody goes back home with no success at all. We're thinking rather of trying to see how, through a flexible process, some of the European partners can work together for the benefit of all the others. Just look at what's going on at the moment with the nuclear issue in Iran. It's 3 European countries, Germany, Britain, and France, that have joined Russia, China, and the United States, and who the 6 of them work together to try to find a solution there. Think about the Balkans. There also, the contact group is a group where you have had a few small parts of the total European partners, Germany, Britain, Italy, France, that have tried to work together because they have common interest in the Balkans to try to find a solution for Kosovo. And this can go on and on. You could talk also about Africa, you could also about Latin America. It's understandable that when you deal with Africa, countries like France, Britain, Portugal, may have Belgium, may have some clear interest. It is normal that some of the European partners who are more on the northern side of Europe may have less interest in that. The same thing with Latin America. Think about Spain or Portugal or France. We may have some particular interest there. Some other countries don't have the same. So we're thinking more and more about dealing with those issues in a more flexible way. But at the same time, and this is going to be one of the major priorities of France with our presidency, we need to have the tools and the instruments necessary to enhance the credibility of Europe. And what I'm saying that, I'm of course thinking about the European defense. At the moment, European defense amounts mostly to 3 countries, Germany, Britain, and France, that add to more than 75 or 80% of the total military effort in financial terms. We need to have more from our other European partners if we want to play a credible role in the future. At the moment, we have started some external military operation in Africa. At the moment, as you may know, there is a European force that is just there at the border between Chad and Sudan, trying to deal with the Darfur crisis and trying to survey the refugees camp at the border between those 2 countries. And we're doing that with a few of our partners, Ireland, Poland, even Russia is thinking, by the way, of getting into that military force, which is rather interesting. And we're trying to show that we're able to do that. And as we go along in the years ahead, we intend to have more and more of those operations going on, external operation, that could be done in good and close coordination with NATO, just to show that we are ready and that Europe is able to share part of the international burden and to play its role if necessary. So I think this is going to be one of the major issues we're going through. But at the same time, and just to let you understand also, we think, as French, that there is a need to dispel some of the misunderstanding that appear in many of our European countries. We need to dispel some misunderstanding or some suspicion that may exist with regard to the future of Europe. I think one of the reasons, there are many others, but one of the reasons why the French voters voted no at our referendum in 2005 had a lot to do with the fact that we are going on enlarging Europe, the European Union, with greater speed each time. If you are well aware of that, let me remind you that as soon as we have ended the negotiations with the new members who are now part of the European Union and who are now, we are all together 27, we have immediately started a new process of negotiation for new membership with Croatia, with Macedonia, and we're going to go ahead with tomorrow with Albania, with Bosnia-Herzegovina, with maybe Kosovo, the day when it will feel sufficiently assured, with Serbia in due course. All this gives the impression to many of our European citizens that we're just going ahead without any sense of purpose of what we're trying to do. So we think that it is important at one point to ask some of our wise leaders, some of our wise men who had the leadership in our countries a few years ago and now have retired, to take up this very large issue of what should be the future of Europe, what should be the kind of common policies we build up for the future. What do we do with this single market that we have tried to harmonize as much as possible? What do we do in terms of coordinating in a better way of economic policy? We have a single currency, but we have no real true common or single economic policy. So we need to work ahead to see how much we can coordinate this economic policy. What kind of common energy policy we can have, what kind of common policy on climate change. All this we have to work on, and we have set up a Wise Men Committee to look a little bit at all this and to try to come up and to shape what should be Europe in 20 or 25 years from now, so that we can reassure our citizens and show them that we know exactly where we're heading for. My third observation, and I will end there because I've taken already too much of your time and I apologize, it's maybe to give you also some of the reflection we're going through with regard to our relations with the United States as we go ahead. I think we are both facing major challenges as we go ahead, and I think our countries, whether it be the United States, France, or the European Union, will have more and more to work together on many of those challenges. Let me just mention three. I think they are the most important, and you will understand very quickly why. Climate change, first of all. We have differences there. France has tried to play some sort of honest broker between the United States and some of the international community so that we could go ahead and try to commit ourselves all together to some important goals in terms of reducing gas house emission effect. It's taking time, it's difficult. The Europeans have a very large program of reducing their pollution, gas, and going for renewable energy, giving more emphasis to nuclear energy also. And we think it is important to have a dialogue and a negotiation with the United States if we want all of us to go together. Of course, that means working together also to give some impulse to all the international community so that they go on working with us. If we don't have on board India, China, and those emerging countries, we will still be stuck with the same problem of pollution if we don't have them on board, so that's very important to have them there. Then there is another major challenge, and you will immediately understand also just by reading the press, it's everything that has to do with the financial and banking sector at the moment. On this, we all have to work together. On the global economy, as the one we are facing today, if we don't find the right tools together, the kind of code of conduct, reciprocity among different countries, looking all together to the kind of decisions we have to take with sovereign wealth funds, for instance, even with the question of exchange rates between the euro and the dollar, if we can't manage to find common solution to those problems, we're going to face very difficult repercussions of the turmoil that is going on at the moment in the financial and banking sector. And this is certainly an area where we have to work together also. Thirdly, everything that had to do with development aid, because we are facing, at least in Europe at the moment, but I think you have also some of the same problems, we are facing a huge wave and huge inflows of illegal immigrants coming from Africa. This is not only a problem for France, it's a problem for Spain, it's a problem for Italy, it's a problem for Belgium, it's getting a problem for all of us. Africa mostly, but also some countries in the Middle East. And if we don't try to see how we can find solutions that could help the development of the countries of origin of those immigrants, we will never be able to manage the problems we're facing today. And those problems are today not only with the countries in Europe that receive those illegal immigrants, they're becoming more and more problems for the countries through which transit many of those illegal immigrants. At the moment in Morocco, for instance, in Senegal, many of those illegal immigrants coming from the southern parts of Africa are stationed there. They're waiting to try to see how they can go and reach Europe. And this is putting a lot of pressure on the population of those countries that are not very rich population, that have already a lot of economic and social problems. And therefore you're creating some sort of social tension there that is going to be very difficult to manage for those countries. So we have to understand that more and more countries are being concerned by this very important issue. So those are some of the issues we're facing. How do we intend to do it? And I will end with 3 quick observations on that. My idea being just to tell you the spirit with which we intend to look at those challenges. I think the first motto is the question of multilateral system. France has always promoted multilateral negotiation and the multilateral solutions for the different issues we're facing. We think that this is one of the most positive way to try to find long-lasting solutions in the issues we're facing today. And what are the problem we think we are facing today is the fact that many of those multilateral tools are out of date today. Just think about the Security Council. We have 5 permanent members. Are not part of those 5 permanent members countries like Brazil, Japan, Germany, South Africa. This cannot go on forever if you want to retain some credibility and some legitimacy to the Security Council. Think about the G8 meetings. There are regular meetings every year of the major leaders of eight countries around the world who meet to talk about the economic situation, to see how we can improve the economic situation around the world. And are not part of those meetings countries like China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, as well as South Africa, etc. They're just invited for a quick lunch on the last day of those meetings, and then very kindly enough they're sent back home saying that it was very interesting to discuss with them only 1 or 2 hours. This cannot go on, and we need to solve that problem too and get those people on board if we want to have a multilateral system that speaks really for itself and that can stand on its 2 feet. Multilateral system, therefore. Second point, question of globality. We're living in a global world, and we're always looking at this global world in terms of global economy or global social tension, etc. We haven't seen and understood yet and perceived maybe as it should be the fact that this global world has also repercussions for the way we act in our diplomatic relationship. How could I illustrate that? Just by 1 or 2 examples so that you understand. Today, if we hope to get a solution, for instance, on the nuclear issue with regard to Iran, it's not only the 6 countries I was talking a few minutes ago, the major countries, the permanent members of the Security Council, that have to work together. You need to talk also about Iran with countries like Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, of course, Egypt, etc. Because those countries also have links with India, also know what's going on there, can be helpful in trying to put forward, to tear around some of the ideas we are trying to promote. And therefore, it is very important for us to try to have this sort of global negotiation. We need to have more and more with all those people. Global also, that means that, as I was saying about Afghanistan a few minutes ago, is that when you look at those issues, you just can't go on thinking in military terms or even maybe in political terms. You need more and more to look in terms of development aid, in terms of technical assistance, in terms of institutional building, and also, and that will be my last point, in terms also of a religious dimension. Being here, I think I need to emphasize, I don't need to emphasize it too much, but just let me give you this third example that I wanted to give you. It's all about dialogue and tolerance. At a moment when we're talking more and more about clashes of civilization, clashes of religion, where we're finding more and more misunderstanding with, let's say, the Muslim world, and quite often, France is trying to promote more and more this idea that, in fact, contrary to what should be maybe our first reaction, is to try to become intolerant and to go into some sort of confrontation, the West against the South, or the West against the Muslim world. We are saying, on the contrary, we have more and more to build bridges, to try to talk to those people, try to see into the different elements of the Muslim world, for instance, where you have some elements of those communities with whom you can speak and try slowly to build gaps and to build bridges that go over those gaps that we have at the moment. I think this is becoming more and more one of the most important issues we're facing today. Nicolas Sarkozy has stated in several interventions he has made very recently that diversity, whether it be religious diversity or cultural diversity, is certainly one of the most important achievements we have to set up as we go along in dialoguing and trying to negotiate with some of those Muslim countries. It is very important that we stick to that and that we remain as tolerant as possible, even with the countries that are not at the moment tolerant, because they are led by some of the most radical elements in the Muslim world. We still have to go on and see how, through dialogue, we can slowly move toward this country to the mainstream of international affairs. And this is certainly one of the issues France will try to emphasize as it goes on in the months and the years ahead. Thank you very much for listening to me so far.
Has agreed to take some questions. We encourage you to make a line here. At my right, we have a microphone. We would ask you to ask your questions, but first, please tell us your name, your major, and where you're from. And please be brief. We only have about 10 or so more minutes, but we would like to hear from as many of you as possible. So please, if you'd come to the queue, and if you have a question, earlier the better. So.
Hi, my name is John Siggy. I'm a political science major from Louisville, Texas. My question regards the nuclear capabilities of France and the recent announcements by Nicolas Sarkozy to scale back the nuclear arsenal of France. And I was just wondering what, in your opinion, are his motivations behind that, and how will it affect France's deterrent capabilities?
Mm-hmm. This decision by President Sarkozy is, to a certain extent, a show of goodwill towards all those who are talking about complete nuclear disarmament. We think that this is not the right way forward because there is still some threats, military threats around the world, and therefore we think that we still need to keep some sort of nuclear deterrence, nuclear dissuasion, as we say in French. But at the same time, in order to show that he was anxious to try to respond to some of those calls for disarmament, we're trying to reduce that nuclear deterrence, that national nuclear deterrence, to the minimum level necessary so that nuclear deterrence remains credible. So we're keeping some of those elements there. We're trying even to upgrade them if necessary, but we're trying to keep them at the minimal level possible, and offer at the same time for others to go along with us in this movement towards lowering the number of elements of any kind of nuclear deterrence. So this is really what it's all about. At the same time, as you may have read in his speech, he has called all the countries to follow the example that we have taken about 12 years ago on banning any nuclear testing and on banning any nuclear fuel at the moment for purposes of nuclear weapons also. So he has set a group of proposals there, hoping that people will come along with the French position. So we will see if this works.
It's Darren Milan. I'm a political science major from Utah. And I was just wondering if I could get a quick response to some of the accusations by the U.S. media that President Sarkozy is somewhat protectionist regarding international free trade. If you could comment on that, and maybe whether or not we'll be seeing any changes in French agricultural policy.
This is a long story with French protectionism. And it's very interesting when you look at the facts, because the truth is that France is one of the main exporters at the moment, the fifth main exporters of goods and services around the world. And we couldn't be protectionist because precisely trade business accounts for more than 40% of our total national product at the moment. So if we started to close our frontiers, we would be lost. So in no way shall we go along that line. The problem is, and this is really what Sarkozy wanted us to emphasize, the problem is about reciprocity. It means that we think that at one point you can't go on being a free trader, opening your markets and not getting the same answer from the country with which you want to trade. Not only with traditional barriers, but also, with the barriers on intellectual property or services or non-tariff barriers that can appear here and there, and that can bring a lot of difficulty for a country like France to be able to export. And of course, at one point, you will have to think also about the question of exchange rate, because you can't go on having a euro that is increasing the way it is increasing, and the level where it is at the moment, without having some repercussion on the exports of the European countries. So those are the kind of issue we want to deal with our different partners, America, but others, of course, in order to have a real free trade world, and not one where here and there you still have some rigidities appearing.
I'm Rob Hamill. I'm from the Marshall Islands, and I study international relations and French studies. And my question for you is on the Lisbon Treaty. And as France and the rest of Europe gets ready to ratify the Lisbon Treaty, my question for you is how the implementation of the changes made in the Lisbon Treaty from the original Constitutional Convention, how that will improve life in France, whether that be for fixing problems with the welfare state or economic well-being of French people, or in any other way.
It could improve the situation in France through what I think is one of the most important elements of the new Lisbon Treaty, is that the qualified majority, the fact that the Lisbon Treaty has decided that more and more issues that we're dealing with inside the framework of the European Union would be adopted by qualified majority. Mind you, we haven't succeeded in getting rid of unanimity. It's still there in some issues. And as I was telling a few minutes ago at lunchtime, just think, for instance, that at the moment, if you would like to change indirect taxation in the sector of French restaurants, French food, we can't do that without the approval of Brussels and without the approval of our 26 partners in the European Union, because it is unanimity. And it is 6 years that we've been trying to get an agreement in the possibility of reducing or cutting our tax rate in indirect taxation in the restaurant sector, and we haven't been able to do that. So you can imagine what is the feeling of some of our great French cooks with regard to Brussels for the time being. And this is where you have some of the grunt of Euroscepticism at the moment is there. So through qualified majority, I think things will improve, certainly. But never forget that still many of the issues we're facing in France when we try to get through this reform process, whether it be the 35 working hours, 35 hours a week, whether we want to improve employment in France, or we want to bring more flexibility in the labour market. This is of national competence. This is something that can be decided by French leadership and by the French government, and Brussels is out of that, and therefore a lot of the work we need to do on ourselves, on our difficulties and on the present economic or social obstacles that we're facing in France, it is mostly for France to do it.
Hello, my name is Chris Tanner. I'm a Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic major, and I'm from Tokyo, Japan. And my question for you, Excellency, is regarding European Union membership and increasing the numbers. You spoke about building Middle Eastern relationships with the European Union. What are your feelings, or what do you believe France's stance will be in the future concerning Turkey's membership in the future?
Turkey is a very controversial issue, as you know. Not only because we decided by the end of 1999, in fact, that we would accept Turks' candidacy for membership, and that since then we have started negotiating with them. And then when Nicolas Sarkozy was elected, Nicolas Sarkozy stated very clearly that he thought that Turkey was not suited for membership. He thought it was too complicated to allow Turkey to become a member of the European Union for many reasons. One of them being precisely what I was saying previously, is that at the moment enlargement is not very popular in France, and if we had to go through a referendum on whether we admit or not Turkey as a membership, all opinion polls indicate very clearly that that the referendum would be a massive no, would result in a massive no. So Nicolas Sarkozy just thinks that it's very difficult to admit this idea of Turkey becoming a member. But, and this is very important, at the same time he has accepted that negotiations should go on. Negotiations that are mostly dedicated, as you know, on the question of how the Turkish can get on board all the European legislation that has been adopted so far by all the European members. So it's a very difficult negotiation that go on usually for 6, 7, 8 or 10 years, and this is certainly what we're going to have to do with the Turkish authorities. And the idea is, so let this negotiation go on, and when we come at the end of that negotiation, let's look at the record, let's look at where we are. What are the difficulties that are remaining, or have we been able to solve all those difficulties? And then when our opinion is to say, then let's look at the kind of very special and close relationship, partnership we can have with Turkey that could be a very strong partnership short of full membership. This is where we are at the moment, and so for the time being negotiations are going on, and we're trying more or less easily to get a relationship with Turkey that may go on and that can be as positive as possible.
My name is Thomas Bradshaw. I am currently studying linguistics. And with regards to illegal immigration, what kind of financial, political, economic policies are currently being implemented towards the development of northern African countries such as Algeria and Morocco? And also, how is the international community responding to that?
With regard to illegal immigration, we're trying to work in several different directions. One of course is the first one, I would say, the one that comes immediately to mind, is to try as much as possible to stop at the borders illegal immigrants. But the second one, most interesting and more interesting, I would say, is to try to see how we can set up new channels of immigration that would be easier to understand by the countries of origin. In other words, at the moment, most of French immigration is rely mostly on the reunion, the gathering of the families of immigrants that have come to France. We have very little professional immigration at the moment, something like 10 or 12% of the total immigration. So what we're looking at is increasing that part of professional immigration, in other words, people coming to work in France, and not people coming only to be reunited with their families. We're trying to increase that part of our total immigration in order to have there a more regular, more sound, more serious and more sound basis immigration. Asking for those immigrants who come to France to learn a little bit of our language, also to understand a little bit of our culture and our society before coming in. So that's the second kind of approach we're taking. And the third one, as I was telling you before, is mostly to go and to see how we can help those countries of origin having internal economic and social development, so that the people who are at the moment running away from those countries, just if only because they can't find any more financial resources, they are in great difficulty in terms of health, etc., etc., just to manage to help those countries so that it's not necessary anymore for their own citizens to go away and make those incredible travels, from the southern part of Africa right up to Europe, with the help of some immigration traffickers that should be under the law and should be punished by law. So this is really the kind of policy we're trying to get through at the moment.
My name is Kyle Carmichael. I'm a political science major from Gilbert, Arizona. And earlier in your lecture, you mentioned that France and other European nations are working for the Darfur conflict, and in this way to show that Europe is ready to share more of a burden of these global issues. I was wondering why France chooses and perhaps other nations to join and participate in the EU battle groups rather than taking a more integrated role in the existing organizations such as NATO, the OSCE.
Oh, we're playing also a part in the United Nations, but you see, when this new United Nations Peace Force has started to be set up in Darfur itself, in Sudan itself, one of the conditions that was put forward by the Sudanese authorities was precisely that there should be no European component of that force. They wanted it mostly to be an African force. So we were asked to see if we could help it in another way. And the way we thought about it was precisely to see at the border between Chad and Sudan, where you have more and more refugees coming by, where also you have more and more rebels from both sides crossing the frontier, was to precisely have an international force. In the end, it will be a European force. It is a European force, but it is being implemented there. A European force that could help try to alleviate the tensions that are appearing there more and more. So it's rather useful purpose. In fact, this has been decided by the resolution of the United Nations, in other words, with the agreement of the whole international community. So this is really part of a more global strategy towards Sudan that is trying to play not only inside Sudan, but also at the borders with Sudan.
My name is Annabelle Selway. I'm from Paris, France, and I'm studying a master's student in French studies. My question is regards religious tolerance. I was wondering what are the steps you're taking with laïcité positive, and how is laïcité going to evolve, and how is it going to be accepted in France?
It's a very difficult question because French people being very conservative, as soon as you decided if you're going to look again at a legislation that dates back to 1905 and trying to modernize it and to see how you can adapt it to the reality of today, then you got, it's exactly what's happened when Nicolas Sarkozy started to talk about that, then you got immediately turmoil, furor, agitation, controversy all over the place, so you have to be very careful. The idea is not to go back on this fact that France is a secular society and that we have been very eager to separate the state on one side and the religion on the other side. It's rather to see how we can try to help more, as we have done already in the past, how we can help more religions, even through public money if necessary, in order to allow those different religions to go on and be in practice and be as free as possible. This is what it's all about. As you know, France is in fact helping private education to some extent. We're even going up to helping through public money, whether it be at the national level or at the local level, helping to set up or to build a mosque or churches if necessary. So this is what it's all about, and we're ready to go on and doing that as a show of tolerance. What Nicolas Sarkozy has been saying, and I think that is rather interesting if you look a little bit at the past, is that what he fears is that as our Western country, at least France, is trying to be as tolerant as possible and to try to promote dialogue between religions, we have the impression that sometimes in some of those Muslim countries on the other side of the Mediterranean, there is not the same kind of tolerance and this same eagerness for dialogue. And furthermore, this has decreased compared with the past. I come from, I was born because my father was a diplomat, so I know a little bit this country. I've lived a while in Tunisia. Tunisia was a very tolerant country 15 or 20 years ago. You could find many Catholic churches there. The Jewish community felt very, very much at ease. The same thing could be said about Egypt or Lebanon or other places like that. Just think about Iraq, where the other day an important leader of the Catholic Church has just died and had been taken hostage before. We see more and more signs of intolerance in those countries. And what Nicolas Sarkozy is saying is we can't go on one side trying to be open, tolerant, and go for dialogue, and on the other side to have this wall slowly moving up, beginning up, and once again, this wall that wasn't there a few years ago. So this is the kind of dialogue that we want to have with those countries, to make them conscious, aware of what is going on in their own country, and asking them to go against that trend as much as they can, which means pleading so that the moderate elements in those societies get the high ground against the more radical ones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jonathan. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I'm a political science major. My question is in regards to dispersing military spending throughout the other countries of the EU. What are the specific reasons why you would want to encourage more military spending?
Well, if we want, just let me give you an example precisely of the European force we are trying at the moment to set up at the border between Chad and Sudan. When we called for some effort by all the European partners, it was very difficult. A lot of them said, we totally agree with the principle. It's okay, let's have this European force, but don't count on me. Just stay aside and just clap hands and say, go on you all, good luck to all of you. We think that if we really want to behave as a European Union that shows some solidarity, furthermore, if we want to be credible to the rest of the world, we need to have a machine that and a European defense that works well, that can easily manage to gather the necessary forces as long as possible. We had to go on agonizing to try to find 2 or 3 helicopters for that European force, and it took us a while to get it. We had thinking at one time to go outside of the European Union to find that. This, we think, should not happen again, and we think, therefore, we have now all together to look at this, to discuss about this, and to get the right instrument that will allow Europeans to play their part tomorrow in any kind of world issue that will appear. And the last one.
My name is Vimont. I'm from Texas, studying philosophy and economics. And I'm just wondering, who would you, and maybe who would you venture Sarkozy would like to see, because we're going to have a new presidency, we'd like to see be elected, and who do you think a general president, or do you think the general population of France, do you think there's anyone they're rooting for as well?
I would fall into that trap. I'm a diplomat, so I have to be careful. Nicolas Sarkozy, the Prime Minister, everybody in France had said that we would be very happy to work with whoever is elected. But let me just add a point, because I think it's very important. And when I'm saying that, I'm very honest. And I've never seen any presidential election in your country that has been followed, watched, and covered by the media with such attention and with such excitement. The interest in my country, the attention towards your election is without any precedent, I think, for we'll ever see. Don't ask me to give you an explanation to that. It is pure fact, and I wish that your elections go well right up to the end.